One of my favorite genres to play is Metroidvania style games with their mix of platforming, earning new abilities, backtracking to previously unreachable destinations, and so on and so forth. There is just something that I absolutely love about these type of games, and luckily I actually feel that we're kind of in the middle of the golden age for Metroidvania style games, and Xbox is a big part of that. The question is though, what are some of the best Metroidvania games you can play right now on your Xbox One? Well, that's why I'm here to give you a list of the top 15 best Metroidvania style games on the Xbox One as of 2020. Now, do remember that just like any of my other lists that I make, this is only my personal opinion, and your opinion may be completely different than mine, and if that is the case, I would love to hear your favorites as well in the comments below. That way we can all discover some new games together. With that said though, let's get right into the list. At number 15, I have Indivisible, which is a prime example on how much variety Metroidvanias truly have, because Indivisible is unlike anything else on this entire list. Of course, it does have a beautiful hand-drawn anime art style to it, but what makes this game so unique is in how the combat works. See, unlike other Metroidvania games where you for the most part either whack your enemies with a weapon or new abilities, and even shoot them with some kind of weapon, Indivisible works completely different. Instead, you fight using a turn-based combat system, more similar to something like a JRPG, and because it is so different, it will largely depend on if you like this type of combat, on whether or not you will like Indivisible. Nonetheless, I do think it's a really good game all the way around, and the platforming's really fun too. It just depends on whether you like a turn-based combat system or not. There are several Shantae games to play on the Xbox One, but arguably the best one of them all is Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, which is actually a port of a 3DS game. Now don't let that fool you though, because the Pirate's Curse is surprisingly very good on home consoles, so much so that you may not even realize that it was originally a 3DS game. It has a witty sense of humor, the platforming feels great, and the combat as well feels really good. While it may not recreate the genre or anything like that, I do think it's a good Metroidvania game that is well worth your time. Yokos Island Express is yet another really unique game on this list, though this is more because of its movement than its combat. See, you actually move around the world like it's one big pinball machine, and if you told me that you could somehow mix pinball with a Metroidvania style game, I would have thought you were crazy. Yet somehow Yokos Island Express pulls this off brilliantly. It is an absolute joy wandering the world of Yokos Island Express. It has a lot of character, and the art style is pleasing with your little beetle-like character. And I just think this one is a lot of fun and definitely worth it if you're looking for something just a little bit different than what you're used to. When I first played Shadow Complex on the Xbox 360 years ago, I was blown away by how good this game looked. Though the thing was, it didn't just look good, but it also felt really good to play. Well, I'm happy to say it has aged rather well, and the remaster brings it back in all of its former glory. This is the first gun-based Metroidvania on this list, but even then, the way it approaches gunfights can be really interesting. Of course, it does draw a lot of inspiration from the godmother of Metroidvanias, Metroid herself, but instead of just shooting at your enemies in a 2D plane, you actually are pitted into several 3D scenarios as well. There are plenty of upgrades to weapons and abilities nonetheless, and it can be a lot of fun to explore. And I especially like the rocket boots that can give you access to new locations, but really I just wish they would make a sequel to Shadow Complex because this truly is a great game. It's no secret that the Dark Souls games has had a lot of influence on the game industry, and it really shows in the Metroidvania genre as well. Blasphemous, of course, is one of those games that have taken inspiration from Dark Souls, whether that be from the combat or in how death takes a heavy toll. Blasphemous is ominous, gory, and sometimes it's just flat out creepy, and it's also a blast to play. This is in large part because of its brilliant combat design. The combat itself, you must be deliberate in how you attack your enemies, rather than just go about mindlessly swinging your weapon. You must also learn the enemy attack patterns, and yes, it can be very challenging, and this goes for the brilliantly made bosses as well. I'm a sucker for when it comes to well-made boss encounters, and Blasphemous does a really good job here. So if you're looking for a Metroidvania with a good combat system, then look no further than Blasphemous. I could have easily placed Guacamole 2 higher on this list. In fact, I think several people might even say it's the best Metroidvania on this list, and I can completely understand why. Sure, it has an interesting art design to it with a lot of vibrant colors, but there are 2 things in specific I really like about Guacamole 2. The first of which is its fun and frantic combat system where it's very fluid and has a nice combo system to it. The other is its challenging platforming, and it is one of the better platforming Metroidvanias on this list. You can even turn into a chicken and unlock even more exclusive abilities. This is a great game from top to bottom. Dead Cells may be one of the more intimidating games on this list because it's actually a mix between a Metroidvania and a roguelike game, so like any roguelike game, when you do die, you start from the beginning. And sure, that sounds like an awful combination with a Metroidvania, but in reality, Dead Cells combines the 2 beautifully. See, when you play this game, you will find new abilities that you can start over with once you die, and you can find little shortcuts here and there, and the combat is a lot of fun with these added abilities to your arsenal. I think it offers a nice gameplay loop that can be incredibly addicting, and I like that challenge that it gives you as well. If you know me at all by this point, I like challenging games, and I think Dead Cells shines from a gameplay standpoint. SteamWorld Dig 2 is an interesting Metroidvania because of how different it is to the other games within the same genre. See, one of the things that I love about this genre so much is how different each game can be. While some focus on combat and others focus on platforming, one of the other key components we cannot forget about is exploration, and this is exactly what I think SteamWorld Dig 2 does so well. The thing is, SteamWorld Dig is all about digging and finding new locations with loot and treasures. There's always things to upgrade which will help you along with your journey. There are plenty of secrets to discover, and I think the world itself is really engrossing, especially if you like the steampunk art style. From the very first moment that I played Iconoclasts, I loved this game. The art style is what really sold me on this game immediately because each character is just so charming, and actually, I think this game almost feels like a JRPG in ways, just because of how the story itself is told. There is a heavy emphasis on the story which largely revolves around religion, and it's very interesting and character-driven. I also liked how the boss designs were made in this game because it's more like solving a puzzle than just simple combat, so it's kind of like a Zelda game in a way. In fact, I think its puzzles are largely well done in Iconoclast, though unfortunately, I'm not actually a huge fan of the combat itself. It does have a lock-on mechanic with the shooting, so it kind of takes away from the challenge in the combat, but because the story and its characters, as well as the puzzles, are just so good, I think it is one of the best Metroidvanias available on the market right now. There was no way I was going to be able to make this list without including Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which arguably is not only the best Castlevania game to ever be made, but the best Metroidvania game to ever be made. In fact, this game put the Vania into Metroidvania, and even though it originally released in 1997, it's still one of the best the genre has to offer all these years later, and thanks to the Xbox backwards compatible program, you can play these on the Xbox One as an Xbox 360 title. It's also very possibly the best way to play this game right now, but why all the praise for Castlevania Symphony of the Night? Well, it's a number of things. First off, the combat is extraordinary, and I really like the RPG aspects of this game. It's a little bit more of an RPG than some of the other games on this list, and even the exploration is masterfully done. It's actually pretty cool too because there's even a secret second half to this game, and how many games actually does something like that? I almost feel like this is cheating by including Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, which feels very similar to Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and really this could be considered a spiritual successor. This was developed by the same guy, Koji Igarashi, and just kind of has a more modern art style to it. I would even go so far to say that Bloodstained is a true AAA Metroidvania. The combat is done very well here with a ton of weapons you can find and unlock, each changing up how you approach the combat. It has light RPG elements to it with a lot of different abilities that you can use, and I think it has some of the best boss encounters in games right now. I wasn't really in love with the story itself, but I do like that you can customize your character, which you don't typically get to do in these style of games, so that was an added bonus. But yeah, if you like Castlevania, then Bloodstained is a must-have. Now, speaking of Castlevania and the inspiration it has had on games, we must look at the other side of the coin here, and that is Metroid. Well, Axiom Verge is practically Metroid with a different coat of paint, and I think right away some people will be turned off by the retro art style of Axiom Verge, but seriously, this game is fantastic. When I first played Axiom Verge, I could not put this game down because of how fun it was. I think it has an interesting story, but the combat and exploration is what I remember about it most. Each new weapon that you unlock acts vastly different from one another, and each weapon will also have their own use for different enemies and bosses. The bosses are really well designed too, but I mentioned this before, and that's the exploration. There is a lot of secrets in this game to find, and not every weapon is just given to you in Axiom Verge. There are several hidden weapons across the map. Axiom Verge isn't just a clone of Metroid though, it's also one of the best Metroidvania games to ever be developed, and a must-play for any fan of the genre. It is absolutely criminal that more people haven't played Monster Boy in the Cursed Kingdom. Not only is this game visually stunning with its vibrant colors and hand-drawn anime-inspired art style, but it's incredibly fun. The cool thing about Monster Boy is how the protagonist can transform into different creatures, and as he learns to transform into different animals, he then can access new locations. I think because your character itself is what consistently changes, rather than just the weapons, it allows you to look at the game in an entirely new way as you progress. Whereas a frog can dive underwater, a dragon can fly, and there is a number of different transformations to play with, and this also affects the world's puzzles as well as the combat. The only nitpick that I really have with Monster Boy is that it is a little bit more on the pricey side of things, but honestly, I think it's well worth it, and in my opinion, one of the best all-around Metroidvanias to date. You had to have known that Hollow Knight was eventually going to show up on this list because without a doubt, Hollow Knight is one of the best Metroidvanias to ever be made. It really is the Dark Souls of Metroidvania games. You have benches for save points, a risk-reward mechanic to upgrade abilities, and the boss designs are possibly the best I've seen in this genre. Really, I do think it's the combat and its world where it truly shines though. Yes, the combat is second to none with a real challenge to it, especially in terms of its boss encounters, but the world will absolutely absorb you. It's dark, gloomy, and menacing. Each sound in the distance comes off as ominous, and when you hear your friendly map friend, you feel a sense of safety, not by just getting a new map to help navigate the world, but also to see a friendly face in this dark world. I genuinely do believe that Hollow Knight is arguably the best Metroidvania to ever be made. And speaking of the best Metroidvania to ever be made, Ori and the Will of Wisps takes the #1 spot. A true AAA Metroidvania with a fully realized world, a mesmerizing, emotionally driven story, and hands down the best platforming the genre has ever seen. Its platforming is so good that it can easily compete with platforming-focused games such as Super Mario. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of Ori and the Blind Forest, though I always marked it as a tie with Hollow Knight, because even though its platforming was really good, its combat was outdone by Hollow Knight. With Will of the Wisps though, the biggest thing that it has improved on was with its combat, and somehow its platforming got even better as well. It's challenging, it's artistically brilliant, the exploration is fun with plenty of memorable characters along the journey, and the ending is just wow. It does have some technical issues as of this moment that will hopefully be patched later on, but even then it doesn't deter from how good this game truly is. So not only do I think Ori and the Will of Wisps is more than deserving of the best game on this list, but it goes on a list all of its own as a true masterpiece and one of the best games that I've ever played. I would also highly recommend Ori and the Blind Forest as the stories are connected, but truly just a brilliant franchise and something that you must play. Anyways though, that's it for this video, but if I forgot to mention one of your favorites, let me know in the comments below so others can discover that game as well. With that said though, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Peace out.